Welcome to the Simple Software Training University video number 204, Index and Batch Logs. In this video, we will go over the logging capabilities in SimpleIndex. We will review a variety of different methods and configurations for exporting the index and batch information to common output formats for use in tracking the scan and index process, as well as producing files for upload by other applications. I have a default configuration set up for an example, and it pulls in some images that I have, automatically indexes them, and sends them to the logging folder for the log that we'll be looking at, and of course the output folder for the images. So let's go ahead and run this job. Like all automatic jobs, it runs in the background until maximized. And then once complete, it closes, and now we have the logging information. As you notice, there's two different logs here, the index and batch log. The index log is the indexing information for the document, which are the index fields. These are my three index fields. Then it also has the path to the image file. By default, it's a relative image path, which is everything after the output path, which is set in the output path when you're setting up the configuration file. Next, we have the page count, which is how many pages are in this particular document. Pages are one side, images. And then we have the batch ID, which is the date at the military time. The other log, the batch log, keeps an overall view of the batch itself, which a batch is a run from start to finish, from scanning to indexing to output. On the first line or row, we have default, which is the username. Now it's set to default automatically because we don't have any users set up, and I'll be showing you how to set up users later in the video. Next, we have the date and time that the batch was started, which obviously corresponds to the batch ID, and then the date and time that the batch was completed. We also have how many seconds the batch took and how many total images were in the batch. And of course, just like in the index log, we have the batch ID, which can be used to link the batch log and the index log together. Now let's take a closer look at the logging options within SimpleIndex. So we'll open up our configuration. We'll go to the job options by clicking this icon, going to File Job Options, or clicking Ctrl-J, and then going to the Logging tab, which is where all the logging setup takes place. You'll notice that we can both enable the log for indexing and the log for batching. So if you just need one or the other, neither or both, you can enable those individually. Next, we have the file type and file format that we would like to output the logs to. Let's pick CSV for this particular one. And let's pick log for this particular one. Or we could pick text. Now, we can also export XML results with the log for the index if you need that for a specific application. And then we have a secondary program called Simple Export that can convert the XML into a variety of different formats that's required by your importing procedure. Let's pick CSV because these are quite easy to view on the output. Next, we have the date interval for both the index and batch log. The date interval sets how often the log is created, and it also affects what the file name for the log will be. So time is the most base level, which means that it creates a new log each time the batch is run. And as you see, it puts the batch ID, which is the date and time, as a part of the file name. We have month selected for the batch, which means that it puts the year and the month only for the file name. As we change that, you can see from the examples down here, the file name changes. Now hour saves a new log every hour, day every day, month every month, and year every year. Month is generally a good option for the batch log. Time or day is usually a good option for the index log. Next is the ID field. That gives you an extra level of file naming if you'd like to add one of the index fields to a part of the index or the batch log. So let's just pick these two for example. Next is the source, which is different options for the user ID, which is the username, the computer name, which is the computer name it's being processed on, and the job name, which is the configuration file that's being run or the job that's being run, which in this case is Sim104. You can see that here. Let's just pick a couple random options for these so we can see what the output looks like. So now we see that Sim104 is the first part, as that's the job name or configuration name. The user ID will be next. The computer name will be third. Then we have the chart number index field fourth. Then we have the date without the time, since we have day selected there, and finally the index log indication with the file format. In the index log format section, we can set up the specific formatting that we want to use for the logs. We can set different column separators which will separate the fields. So in this case it's comma, which is the most abundant and default separator. But you can pick from our list of drop-down, pipe, semicolon, or tab, or you can type whatever you want here, and it will separate with ABC instead of a comma. The output field names on first line will put the column headers for what these fields are. So if you remember in this, it just has the index information, but it doesn't tell you what the columns are. If I put the column headers in, it'll tell what these fields are called. So that way you can tell what those are. Generally you want to leave that off unless you're using that to track different things visually. Let's turn it on for this case. Put quotes around the field values, puts quotes around each of the fields. It's very important if you have actual separators that are the same as your field separators within the value itself, because it would automatically separate based on that separator even if you didn't want to. But the quotes actually make it unique and allow you to put the field separator within the value itself. The output full path to exported files exports the full path to the image as opposed to the relative path that we see here. So what it would do is it would put the output path here and then leave this part on the end. Strip leading slash from path actually strips this particular slash in case that's required for any reason. Use forward slashes in the file path uses forward slashes instead of backslashes. Include file path field, of course, includes the file path itself. Include page count and batch ID fields, allows you to keep or remove those fields. And then output file path, page count, and batch ID first puts these three fields at the beginning of the row instead of at the end. The database batch logging section allows you to output the batch information to a table in a database. So you would set the batch log table that you'd like it to go to here, and then the batch ID field, which as we well know is the date at the time in military time, here. The database that it points to is set up in the database tab. The database tab is also where the indexing information will go to if you'd like to go to a database for the indexing information as well. The database options will be gone over in another video. The Edit Users section is where you add users to your listings. We can require login, which makes you pick a username. And then we can add a user here and click OK. Now, without a database to connect to, it'll just require that the person put the name in. But if you connect to a database with security, it will use the username and the password that's set for the database itself, which is how you use security for that database. But without that, it'll just make you pick a name without putting a password in. Show log after batch automatically opens the index log in the simple index screen, so that way you can quickly visually check that everything was scanned correctly, if that's a format that you prefer. Now that we have all these fields set, let's run another configuration. And of course, we have to pick the username, even for changes like this. And now we'll see what the log looks like now that we've changed these options. So now we see that Simple Index has opened the index log in the window, as well as created the index log as a CSV file. So let's open that index log now. I have CSV files set to open in Microsoft Excel by default, which is a very easy to read format. So now we see that these fields are in columns. We have the column headers here. We have the full path instead of just the partial path. And then the batch ID now also has the index field that we set. The batch log also has the column headers. And finally, you see that the name corresponds to how we configured that name. So we have the configuration name, the username, the computer name, the index field, and then the date. That's the end of the Simple Software Training University video number 204, Index and Batch Logs. We've seen how to configure the index and batch logs to output to the location that you want and the format that you require for regular review and tracking or uploads into other applications.